Good morning, everyone. I hope your day is starting off just as fantastic as possible. I have some good news for you this morning because I'm sure that we're all tired of hearing constant bad news, how we can't get our products to market, and how everything in Canada is broken. Well, surprise, there's some good news today, and it's actually really good news. How do you like that for an introduction? Let's look at some numbers here. Statistics Canada has published the March trade figures, March being the first month that was a full month affected by the tariffs implemented by the United States on Canada. And they report, and I'm just going to quickly read a summary on a CTV News article, but then show you the actual numbers, which are surprisingly positive for Canada. And as a result of this trade war, Statistics Canada said that the exports to the United States were down significantly for the month, down about 6.6%, which is a huge drop. And that on its own would really be a bad sign for the Canadian economy. That's a really big drop. Never have we seen that kind of drop since COVID, I think, when things were just shut down. That's a big number and a big change when you're talking about month over month change in exports with a large trading partner like the United States. So on its own, that sounds like very bad news. And it was expected, right? Because if there's tariffs on U.S. imports of Canadian goods, then U.S. companies would probably be more reluctant to import those products from Canada because remember, the United States importers pay the tariffs, something that still 40 or 50% of Americans don't understand, but I'll keep mentioning it. And if you're a viewer from the United States, just know that an import tariff is a tax on the company that's doing the importing. So the United States importers are subject to this tax, and of course they've bought less goods from Canada, right? And this is partly what the US administration wanted to balance out the trade between Canada, because before these tariffs were launched, the United States bought more from Canada than they sold to Canada. So by imposing the tariffs, now they bought less, 6.6% less month over month in March. So that's the bad news. But what's the good news? The article goes on to say, but this increase was almost entirely offset by a strong increase in exports to countries other than the United States, pointing to a 24.8% surge in shipments overseas. That's massive. Almost a 25% surge on shipments overseas. The jump in exports to those other countries fueled the second largest percentage increase in history on record, said Statistics Canada. Imports from the United States, meanwhile, fell 2.9% amid souring public sentiment toward Canada's historical ally and largest trading partner. The month saw higher exports of gold to the United Kingdom and crude oil to the Netherlands and various products to Germany. An increase of crude oil exports to the Netherlands. Why do you look so sad, Danielle? If you go here to the Statistics Canada website and actually look at the data, I'm just going to show you one chart. We're not going to go through 1,000 numbers, but one chart that is really, really interesting. And I'll just read their summary. This is the summary from Statistics Canada. They say when international trade in goods and services are combined, exports edged down 0.1% to 87.6 billion in March, which is 0.1% is almost no change. So our exports didn't change. Even though the U.S. is buying 6.6% less from us, our total exports really didn't change. Meanwhile, imports decreased 1.3% to 88.5 billion. So we're selling more and buying less. As a result, Canada's total trade deficit with the world went from 2.1 billion in February to less than 1 billion in March. This is great news. If you're an economist, you look at these numbers and you go, that's great. Trade war? What trade war? It's more like a trade realignment. A trade realignment with the rest of the world, less trade with the US, and that's what they wanted, that's what they get, and we're trading more with the rest of the world. Now let me show you this chart, and I made my head as small as I can so you can read the numbers, but it lists the total exports and lists the countries, the main countries that we export to, but I just want you to concentrate on the column just to my right on the screen there, which is the percentage change. So total export percentage change is 0.2%, almost the same. But look at the United States, the first country on that list, down 6.6%. China, down 3.6%. And that's a result. Remember, China we put tariffs on China on their EVs, on their electric vehicles, and they reciprocated by putting tariffs on, I think, some seafood products and some soybean and seed products. So trade between China and Canada is stressed. So those two numbers are down. But look at the list. Look at the list below that. Mexico, percent change, up 4%. Japan, up 3.4%. Germany, up 52%. United Kingdom, up 93.7%. South Korea, up 27%. And the Netherlands, up 74.8%. Look at United Kingdom. Our exports to the United Kingdom almost doubled. It's almost like having a prime minister now who had a very important job in the United Kingdom, governor of the Bank of England. It's almost like that is a positive thing. Maybe this guy has a few contacts. So the message here is that I think there's a lot of doom and gloom talk going on. And this has to be viewed as a huge positive. And there's going to be more positive news coming because numbers that are not reflected in these export and import numbers, that's what Statistics Canada just released. There's other numbers that will manifest in our GDP and other statistics that will come out. And that's going to play out a lot in the summer months, is that Canadians are going to spend a lot more money at home as opposed to going to the United States. Those numbers are going to filter through in our economic numbers. And those are not small numbers. It's a small number individually for each individual person, maybe not spending $1,200 to book a hotel in Vegas, or not spending $500 shopping on a weekend in wherever across the border. But when you add it up, of 40 million people, 30 or 40 or 50 or 60% of which are just not going to go to the US and spend money. They're going to spend money here. That's going to be a big number. So all is not so bad. But you have to temper this, because overall, the numbers look really good, but there's certainly some specific sectors that will be affected. And very unfortunately, there's already been layoffs in the auto sector and in, I believe, in Quebec in the aluminum industry and in different specific parts of the economy. And I don't have all those details in my head here, but there's a difference between when you look at global numbers or the average across the country, and the numbers look good. Right? That's fine for the whole country as a whole, but there are going to be certain individuals. If you get laid off, the numbers look terrible. Right? It doesn't matter how good these numbers look. If you're the one person that gets laid off, the numbers for you are terrible. So now we have to count on our government using the proceeds from our retaliatory tariffs. Remember, Canada has placed strategic retaliatory tariffs on the United States, targeting products that we can get elsewhere. And there were some comments in the comment section in the last couple of videos. It sounded like some Americans that maybe aren't up to speed with some of the facts, saying, well, where are you going to get it? If you can't get stuff from us, we're the biggest country, you won't be able to get it anywhere. Well, that's simply not true. We don't need oranges from Florida. We can get them from Mexico. We don't need alcohol from the United States. We can get that from anywhere in the world. There are a lot of products in agriculture and lots of things that we can source from other countries. And that's why the trade numbers have jumped so much with trade with countries in Europe and countries other than the United States and China. And this kind of illustrates why trade wars are bad. And it's pseudo proof of what economists say. We're basically having a tariff war with the United States and China, and you can see that both those numbers are down. This type of restriction in trade through tariffs is just not good for either country, and it's going to manifest itself with negative numbers and many more people being affected. So as I mentioned in a previous video, in the short to medium term, I said that Canada has a fairly good position because we know that we're in a dispute. We know we're in a trade war. We got the elbows up, and we can take a little bit of pain. But it looks like the pain may not be as much as we thought. On the other hand, for Americans, they're looking at these numbers and saying, so what? Canada's a small percentage of what we trade with. Actually, about 16%. It's a very large percent of your economy. Listen to this statistic, okay? Our balance between the United States and Canada is almost balanced. I know we talk about trade surpluses and deficits, but it's pretty close, within just 5% of each other. The total trade between the two countries, exports and imports, is fairly balanced. If we just cut that off, if we magically just cut that off to zero right now, the value, the total dollar value of lost trade is the same in both countries, pretty much. The same dollar value, it just represents a bigger proportion of Canada's trade than the US, because the US is much bigger. The 15% of trade the US does with Canada is worth about the same dollar value as the 65% trade that Canada does with the US. So what Canada needs to do, and what it looks like it's doing very rapidly here, is switching some of our trade to other countries. I wanted to make this point. I think I started making the point, but I didn't make it. For the United States, an American might say, well, that, so what? You're only 15%. Those numbers, they don't really mean much to us. But my point is that the trade war and the tariffs will affect Americans more, because they're going to see the higher prices. They're going to pay for these tariffs. Right? Even though they've imported less product, 6.6% less from Canada now, the 93.3% of stuff that they still imported from Canada all has tariffs on it. And U.S. importers paid those tariffs. That money went to the U.S. government. So I guess Donald Trump's happy, saying we're making a lot of money. When he says we're making a lot of money, he means the U.S. government is making a lot of money from these tariffs. But when those importers go to sell those products, or use those products to make something, or use that energy product to fuel a factory that makes something, it's going to cost more. And they'll pass that cost on to the consumers, the American consumers. And the United States is having a similar trade war with the whole world. So everything that they buy now, and remember, the U.S. is the largest consuming nation on earth, for each country that's out there that they've imposed tariffs on, it's a self-inflicted wound of increased costs. So American consumers, these numbers are just for March. But remember, the imports go to the United States. Maybe things are going to get manufactured. Maybe things are going to work their way through the retail supply chain. The old inventory is going to be sold. The new products that the U.S. importers have probably stockpiled a lot before the tariffs hit. But eventually, into the summer and into the fall, and when we get to these the big sales before Christmas, if the U.S. is still charging tariffs on everything that's imported into their country, American consumers are going to start really noticing increased prices, inflation, self-inflicted inflation, and let them have it. Let them have it, and Canada can trade and increase trade with the rest of the world. The world is a much smaller place now. When we first started down the road of integrating our economy with the United States, back after the Second World War, it was a huge effort to trade something from Canada to Europe. Ships were slower, the trade routes were the technology, communications, the payment systems, everything. There weren't any satellites. It was a different world then. But now the U.S. implements tariffs, and 1 month later, we've doubled our trade with the UK. And those numbers will probably keep going up, and the U.S. number might keep going down. And over the mid to long term, we may end up having a much healthier, more robust economy. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, I'm almost at the line. If I cross this line, I move into the realm of inflammatory rhetoric. Okay, guys, I'm just a little excited because the numbers are really good, and everyone should breathe a sigh of relief. But this only represents 1 month. It was just March. We'll see how the numbers play out, but it certainly is a very sharp turn, and a very positive turn for Canada. Instead of hearing all the bad news all the time, right? Canada's broken, everything's terrible, we can't sell our product. So leave some comments in the comment section, guys, and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content, and be happy. Have a fantastic day, because I guess at least today, things aren't so bad. I'll catch you guys on the next one.